Welcome to the Man Up God's Way podcast, a show that dives into the real, raw, and relevant issues for men and their faith, life, and community. Now, your host, Jody Burkeen.
Here we are again on another Monday night podcast with the Man Up God's Way crew, and we're glad that you guys are joining us today. If you get an opportunity, if you will, share this with all of your friends and anybody on social media. We need all the help that we can get to reach more and more people, not only for the podcast, but for the sake of the gospel. People will hear the gospel message on our podcast, and our guests will also be sharing their stories as well. So if you get an opportunity, make sure that you hit the share button, the like button, or the subscribe button, depending on which social media you're watching at this time. So we want to thank you guys again for supporting us and coming alongside of us. Our podcast is growing each week, and it's all thanks to you guys. And God bless you guys. All right. As usual in the studio, I have Mr. Ben Neely with me. Ben, how you doing, brother?
I'm doing good. Good to see you.
Good seeing you, man. I'm glad you're back. You had a nice little break last week.
I did.
I think you had the little man flu. Is that
No,
what you had?
remember we went to so at our church, my wife and I, we lead the outreach ministry. Right. And so since all three of us were going to be here and we had a guest, which means less conversation by us and more by them if we do our jobs right. We went and met with a life group. Okay. And just kind of told them where the heart of the outreach ministry was coming from. And they were interested in how they can get involved. So I called you and
I forgot about
let you know. Yeah.
I've slept since then.
Yeah, absolutely. So. You got so much going on. So yeah, it's good to be here. I'm excited about the guest tonight.
Oh, me too.
I've got 3 grandkids that are 9, 6, and 5. So
that'd be good.
I'm interested to see this book.
That'll be good. I'm looking forward to it too. So yeah, I spent the weekend at a marriage retreat.
Yes,
actually preaching at a marriage retreat. So my wife and I had a great time doing that, and it was for Johnny and Friends, which is a beautiful, massive ministry for those who have special needs and disabilities. And so we got to go along on the weekend and help couples who actually have special needs kids, and it was completely mind-blowing.
Yeah,
just to know the stuff that they're going through. You know, like when we typically do marriage retreats, it's like, oh yeah, we got to do this, and this, and it's like pretty systematic for those who have, just regular kids or teenagers or whatever. But it's completely different when you're talking about people who have special needs kids, because it takes up majority of their time and focus, and some of these kids will never leave their homes.
Yeah.
And it was definitely eye-opening.
I got to tell you, man, I left, I had a friend who's got a special needs child. And I remember the first time I ever went to their house and I left there, and me and Stacy were driving home in the van, and I looked at her and I said, he's a better man than me.
Oh yeah.
Like I couldn't do that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not, and that's nothing negative. It's more negative about me.
Right.
Like I'm sure if when I had children, had I had a child with special needs, I'd adjusted.
Oh yeah.
So this isn't was it called? It's in a vacuum. I'm looking at this,
especially
at
your age now, and you're thinking, man, how comfortable you are. Yeah.
But what God did with that was He still used it as a lesson in my life. He said, "Listen, dude, you got to step up and serve your wife a little more. Look what this dude's doing."
Right.
Like I'm not joking.
Right.
I left there thinking, man, he is such. So it was on one hand, yes, because I wouldn't want to have to go through all that. Right. But on the other hand, positively, is the day I decided, well, you know what, I need to start stepping up and home.
Right. That's
more,
great.
That's
great. Yeah. It opened up our eyes for a lot of stuff too, because we're trying to make our church as disabled and special needs kids friendly as possible. And it definitely showed us some work that we need to do.
Absolutely.
So I'm excited about that.
That's good.
Well, folks, as usual, we've got an amazing guest tonight. Really excited about this interview and some of the things that he's got going on. Mr. Alex Early, how you doing, sir?
Good, thank you. Thank you for having me.
It's Mr. Pastor Doctor, isn't it?
Yeah, something like that.
Okay.
Another name. Yeah.
Well, good. So Alex and I met, kind of through emails and had been going back and forth, and really excited. I think somebody from your group reached out to us to get you on the podcast. So we're really excited about having you on here because about what we're going to talk about. But before we get into that, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? Start off with, I know that you're over in Seattle and that you're pastoring a church there. Why don't you start and bring us up to speed?
Yeah. So, let's see. I didn't grow up here in Seattle. I grew up just outside of Atlanta in a small farm town called Woodstock. And now it's a place on the map. But when I grew up there, it was a very small, blinking traffic light, rural country town. And but I grew up in the church, and I became a Christian in the 10th grade, and about a month before I started driving. And that was great for a lot of reasons, honestly. But really where I was in life, I was not on the trajectory to just go and be a pastor or write or anything like that. And so God reached into my life at a critical point and turned my heart toward his.
And so, what was that moment like? How was that moment?
Yeah.
Like, was it church? Was it a youth group? Was it going out of bed?
It was, well, through a series of events and getting in a lot of trouble with school and police and things like that, and just like getting into just basically every parent's nightmare. It's like, oh gosh, man, I just kept going down the roads that they were going to end up in some really bad places. And so as I was in that season of life, it had me kind of thinking about my choices, and things I was doing and things I knew were wrong or whatever. But like, it started getting a little hotter and hotter, and I started thinking more and more about where I was headed. And so I'd still gone to church. My family was involved, and but I couldn't have been less into the gospel. Right. But our youth group was exploding. It was a huge youth group, and the youth pastor was very much so down to earth and spoke on a level that I could understand. And my Sunday school teacher really was also pretty incredible. This guy named Jeff Smith, and he took a bunch of guys through an apologetics study and said, you guys want to hear what Christianity has to say to Islam or Judaism or Mormonism or whatever? Yeah, great. Yeah. And it was during that time that I began to see that the Christian faith was actually it wasn't just about morals and ethics and being a good person. It was about becoming a new creation, and that it was intellectually credible and it was worth investigating. So that was around the time all that was coming together at one time. Wow. And then I became a Christian at a youth group gathering one night, and I heard John 3:16 sung or either quoted by a band, and just standing there, I thought, excuse me, I told my friend Mikey, hey man, I believe that. And he was like, yeah, dude, that's great. And I was like, no, man, I think I believe that. And he goes, oh, okay. And
that's great.
And that was the beginning of my journey with Jesus. And so, but to then fast forward out to get out here to go ahead and move on. But I knew God was calling me into the ministry right away, about 90 days in. I knew he was calling me, but I didn't know what that was going to look like. I didn't know, didn't have a clue. Like most people, when it comes time, when you sense God calling you into the ministry, you have an idea, but then God has his plan and his idea. Right. So your job for the first few years is to, I guess, just go figure out what sticks and where you find yourself thriving and where figuring it out, like any occupation in a lot of ways. Yeah. Right. So anyway, went through college.
Real quick there. I just want to make a point real quick. It just what he just said. That's why when people come into the church, we encourage them so much to just serve.
Right.
Someone. Yeah. Just get in and you will find your way. You are going to fail at things. Jody was the worst kids pastor ever. He left there having to repent for wanting to beat every one of them every week.
The youth
pastor. But he found, youth pastor.
Yeah.
But you found your calling, right? Yeah. I thought I was going to be a pastor. I do outreach. I have a heart for missions. Never, but I just kept trying to serve, right? So I just want to make that point there.
That's very good.
Yeah, that's it.
Very
like good. You just have to keep trying. Like you just figure it out over the years. And listening to your spouse and listening to your mentors and listening to pastors and paying attention to your own self and your heart and your motives and all that. Like God's far more interested in doing a work in you, than maybe through you. Like he can accomplish anything he wants in the world. It's not like he's challenged.
Right.
It really is. So it's so important to cultivate that character and all the rest. So I went to college, got into college on academic probation because I had, like I said earlier, I screwed off so much in high school. It's like, this guy's not going to college. In fact, I could tell you terrible stories, but anyway, I got into college on academic probation and did well. And it was the first time I'd actually done well in school. And I fell in love with going to the library. I fell in love with studying. And like all of a sudden, it was like a light bulb went on. And I found myself thriving and really enjoying studying theology and getting my head around some of these ideas to the best of my ability. And from there, I met my wife during college and we got married shortly thereafter. And, I'd served in various ministry capacities, gone to a lot more school. And then finally, now I'm out here. I've been in Seattle now for, I guess, 7 or 8 years, pastoring our church, and really have found myself content in the pastorate. But like I said, it took a lot of years of trying in different places and trying on different things. And I thought initially I was going to go be a theology professor. I didn't really intend on serving the church at this capacity. I planned on maybe being a deacon or something, and volunteering and that kind of thing. But God gave me a heart for the church and seemed to have called me into this line of work. And so, I've tried a lot of things, but it's a matter of
kicking and screaming.
Yeah. In some ways, some days it is kicking and screaming, but So I've been out here in Seattle for 7-8 years, and it's been great.
That's great. What's the name of the church?
Church is called Redemption Church. We're in the city here in Seattle.
Oh wow! Okay, so you're right down there.
Mm-hmm.
So on a side note, this is just curiosity. How did the Mars Hill fallout? How did that help or hurt Redemption Church? Because you're right in the middle of that.
Yeah. It's hard to say if it helped or hurt. It's a lot of both,
Right.
I was involved in Mars Hill for a little bit of time before.
Oh, were you really? Okay.
Yeah. And man, it's been a lot of pain, honestly. There was a massive podcast. You probably came across it.
Yeah, it's good too. They did it right. Yes.
Yeah. And I Mike called a couple times and asked if I would go and be on that podcast because I was the lead pastor over at Ballard. And I
had no clue. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So
wow.
But I declined. For me, I just didn't.
Time to move
I'm
on.
pastoring people on the ground here, like Mike's in wherever, St. Louis or something. It's like, for me, it's, dude, you're talking, this podcast is talking about my actual friends.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
People in the church. And you got people all over the world talking about my backyard. And I'd love to see hundreds of people charge in and help me clean up. That'd be amazing. But
Right.
it's easy to like talk about. It's like reality TV or something. It's like easy to talk about like, oh, that looks like a disaster over there. Anyway,
Well,
check the
I
channel.
did not mean to push that
Oh,
knife
no,
into
no,
it
it's
further,
fine.
because I had no clue, man. I was just
Totally.
talking about the
No,
surrounding area,
it's just a normal thing. It's what we
Right.
have to talk about here. So it's not a big deal.
Right.
No,
For
Okay.
me, I just kind
he
of,
makes a good point.
Right.
There's
Where's
all
it?
kinds of Christian people listening to the podcast and pundits having it,
Right.
talking about it and this, that, and the other. But where's all the help to go see? Okay,
Right.
let's say this happened, and I don't know the whole story. I know a little bit based on what you told me. It doesn't,
Right.
but there's evident. I mean, if you left, there would be people that would need support, help
totally.
to hold the church together. Where are those people?
That's a good
That's
point.
what I'm saying.
Yeah, that's good.
So, I mean, honestly, like it, you know, for all the good that the podcast exposed, there's also a lot of things that were left off the table that were not talked about. And I think for me, it ended up opening up a lot of wounds for a lot of people. I mean, this was where they were, and now they're hearing about, oh yeah, I was a part of that cult that got destroyed on the news, and I'm forever scarred and shamed and embarrassed and afraid to go back to church as a result.
Wow.
And those are very real stories and very real friends of mine. And so
holy cow, man.
It's a different thing when it's your family all of a sudden on the news. You're like,
totally.
Oh, so anyway,
it's like literally, I mean, that podcast, because I had followed Driscoll for years. I mean, especially the kind of ministry that we have through Man Up God's Way, and he just kind of he caught me. I was an atheist before I came into church, and full blown atheist. Like, if it weren't for my kids, I would probably still be one, or I should say the grace of God. But it was when early in my younger years, the stuff that I was hearing and reading, I just didn't like, because it didn't really didn't impact me. And then, man, all of a sudden Driscoll comes out, Chandler comes out, and like all of these guys they were saying stuff that most pastors wouldn't say all of a sudden. I thought, holy cow. And then, I just kind of watched him, do this, and all of a sudden you could just see the bell curve just kind of hit, and here comes the crash. And I could see it from here, and I wasn't even involved with that stuff. So it really affected me. It was like, oh, why, how does something like that happen? And as a business guy, I used to be a business guy too, and I can see how that would happen. You got numbers coming, and you got money coming, and it's kind of like, all right, let's just let it go, kind of deal. And again, I'm not speaking for you. I'm just saying, from the outside looking in, I can imagine. I can't even imagine what you guys have gone through. And so I apologize again, because
there's nothing to apologize for.
I had no clue.
Really gives our context.
Yeah.
It really is. It's not a open wound. It's not like a reliving a trauma for me. It's to answer the question directly, though, like, living in the wake of it has been very challenging.
Right.
Because we're at the ground of deconstruction of just about everything.
Right.
And so it's
not only did you have that, but then, a few years later, you've got COVID, and then you've got the political mess that's going on up there, and the movement and the woke movement and everything else on top of you. Like that to me, I'm thinking, man, especially if you're downtown St. Louis, Seattle, you need prayer. Like, holy cow.
I mean, it really is it's no joke out here. I'm telling you, no joke.
Imagine.
Yeah, one of my best friends moved here a few years back from the Gig Harbor area. There.
Yeah. So in many ways, it's been extremely challenging. In other ways, those challenges have refined me as a pastor, and it's definitely refined a lot of our people to start reevaluating a few things about what's most important in the life of the church, and to start grading things by far different metrics than maybe we ever would have. The simple metrics are church attendance, dollars, staff, and baptisms. But the metrics that God ends up grading us by more often are faithfulness and character and serving the poor and things like this, like things that like don't get any attention, but the place where Jesus told you to go was your prayer closet. And so, and close the door. And so it's this secret life of righteousness that Jesus is very much so interested in. And
that's good.
So it's been very good for us as a church community to be able to go, let's practice the very simple basic things about the Christian faith in our context. And so for all of the battered and bruising that happened to so many people, there's also been a lot of refining and purifying that has caused us to see things that we otherwise would have overlooked or never would have seen anyway. So or would have discounted as, oh yeah, of course, go in your closet and pray. It's like, maybe really we should have
really need to. Yeah, exactly. So what matrix are you like? You're saying you're looking at different matrix, and that kind of help you, after focusing on all the typical, stereotypical, I should say, business matrix. You've kind of gone a shovel or two deeper in order to start looking at the actual character of the people and whether they're serving, giving, or not giving, but giving other time and different things like that. So how are you, is that like through accountability, or is that through just watching the church grow and the homeless being taken care of and the widows and the orphans and all of that kind of stuff? Or how are you actually doing that?
Trying to keep an eye on things that are seem to be the things that Jesus makes really, really clear. Like,
it's good.
Are we serving the poor? Like,
oh, I'm so glad you're on here.
So those are the kinds of metrics that we have to start looking at and go, really, are we serving the poor, the elderly, Title I schools, refugees? These people get pushed to the margins very quickly for any number of reasons, and going, if we're going to be faithful in our city, we can't just go with what we saw here for 20 years and think that that's the right move. We do need to be practically serving those on the margins. So that's one thing, but like also seeing lives of like deep spiritual formation actually being cultivated, like where people are actually engaging the Bible and actually engaging their own faith. And so you can't measure it in the sense that you can say, okay, we went from 50 baptisms last year to 100 this year. That's not the metric to measure things by, because it honestly, it smacks of blasphemy against God, and it certainly sounds dishonoring to people to be like, because, so I'm the number on your year-end report. I thought my conversion to Christianity had so much more to do with God sovereignly regenerating my heart and birthing me from above and making me new. And now I was blind. Now I see. I thought that's what was happening, but we trivialize people by doing things like that. And it makes people feel like they're being used in a cog in a system, in some kind of machine. And nobody wants to be used like that. And so, and while it's important to give numbers and updates and say, here's where we're at and here's all that God's done, we also need to be very tasteful and tactful, and maybe not be so tacky in our moments where we're celebrating the wins, as though like it can just be so off-putting, especially in a very post-Christian context like ours here.
And especially in sales, like, in sales in general, the problem with sales is that, okay, this month you reached your goal, but you start at zero and then you got to reach your goal again, and I think that's been propagated, even into the church. It's like, okay, so we got we got your number. Now we got to get somebody else's number. And it's, it's not a personalized, way of metering the metric, so to speak. So dang, that you just rock my world.
So
but it's also, you do want to have you do want to see your church grow. You do want to
exactly. Yes. Yeah.
Want to see more people serving and being in community and all that stuff too. So it's not wrong to say, hey, we have 2, what you call them a minute ago, life groups. It'd be great to see in the next 6 months 4 life groups. There's nothing wrong with like saying, let's raise up some leaders and like put some vision out in front of people.
Right.
It's just, we tend to do it in the church. We tend to be so tacky and tasteless with it that people end up feeling used because they are being used for some other agenda other than actually worshiping Jesus and serving other people. And you can feel it in those moments. And so, yeah, so for us, some of our measurements are very simple. Like our vision is very simple. We're responding to God and the gospel through living lives that are faithfully present to God, to ourselves, and to each other. So in Seattle, because we're so transient and so distracted, being present is kind of the virtue that we're trying to cultivate more than anything. Like the majority of our church will turn over in the next 18 months, no problem. Like by 70%. So I'm envious of like college pastors who get their kids for 4 years. I get people 18 months and they're gone because it's Amazon, Starbucks, Costco, Apple, Facebook, you name it. There's so much transience here of people coming and going. So it's like, okay, I got you for 18 months. Let me show you what like a faithful disciple is going to look like in Seattle. It's somebody that's present to God, somebody that can watch their own life and doctrine closely, somebody that's present to themselves, and somebody that's actually present to other people, both inside and outside the church. And so that's how we kind of measure those things. It's like, are you showing up in these areas of your life? Let's start there.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. Then you were going to say something.
Well, I was just going to say earlier that on the day of judgment, he did you feed me? Did you clothe me? Did you visit me when I was in prison? That's what he says. He doesn't say how many people did you bring to heaven with you, although we need to preach the gospel to everybody. He doesn't say that. Now, I'm not telling you that this is what it means. This is what I believe. I don't believe Jesus is saying that the only thing that's important is feeding, clothing, and visiting the prison. I do believe what he's saying is, if you guys can't do this stuff, what are we doing here? Like, you're a Christian. What are we doing if we can't do this stuff? So I think you're right on. I think you're right on point there. I think I thought I heard a quote one time that said, you want to talk about how healthy your church is, find out how many people are volunteering to do the kids in the youth ministry.
Yeah.
How many people are serving in your church?
Right.
And this, that, and the other. So I love that spirit. I love what you're trying to do there. Because that's the one thing, the other night at our church, we had some type of a men's stakeout where a bunch of guys get together. We just talk, a bonfire, and basically the devotional that was done that day was just saying, hey, where's your fruit? That fruit that's proof, not that's getting us anywhere, but it's proof. It's the work in us that God says he's going to do. God doesn't fail. Why aren't we seeing it in these areas? And I looked at all the guys and I said, we've got 25 guys here tonight, but if you put an outreach out there, sometimes you got 8 guys that volunteer. Why are we doing that? And I wasn't personally attacking them. All I was trying to do was to get them to think about that.
Totally.
Because as Christians, that's not how it should be. We want 50 people at the stakeout. We also want 50 people to want to serve when a widow needs to help move. Right.
That's good. That's good. So you've got your church now, and did you plant that church after?
I was at the beginning.
Okay.
Yeah. There's a couple other guys that really started getting it off the ground, and then I came and joined the team, and then they moved on. But they met me and asked me if I would come and basically lead the church, and so I did.
That's great. So you got your doctorate in was it intercultural studies? Is that what you did?
Yeah.
Okay. Explain to me what that. I'm kind of like you, but I'm about 30 years past where you are. I flunked out of college and joined the military, and then so I did the military stuff and then got into business, and then 2020 I went and got my bachelor's degree and then I started in my master's in theology. And so I'm right in the middle of getting my master's in theology right now. So I'm 54, so I don't know if I'll go the doctorate route yet or not, but I'm still praying to see if that goes. But I've never needed a degree. I planted a church and became a pastor of a church, and have this international men's ministry. God just kind of took me, kind of like what happened to you is like, I'd never read a book until I was 33 years old. I gave my life to the Lord, and then all of a sudden the Holy Spirit just took over, and now my library looks like yours behind
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
It's just kind of like, holy cow, I
That
just
happened.
read, and it's one of those things that just kind of took over. So I'm interested in, possibly moving on further as far as my education goes. So what does intercultural studies look like as a doctorate?
Yeah. So intercultural studies comes out of the field of missiology,
Okay.
and studying anthropology and sociology and psychology and hermeneutics, and you're really trying to integrate all of these things together, at
Right.
one. So for me, I took some of the work that I built on in London. I did one of my degrees was over at London School of Theology in hermeneutics. And I took some of the research and writing I'd done there, and we turned it into eventually what went on to be my doctoral work in the atonement of Jesus, and trying to think these things through and articulate, especially the doctrine of penal substitutionary atonement, in a 21st century context, because that doctrine has come under so much fire and has been so rejected by a lot of people in recent years. And so I wanted to look at that and think about that doctrine a bit more, because one, I don't want to just throw a baby out with bathwater or something like that and just jump on some people jump on bandwagons and some people don't. And so for people that don't believe in that doctrine, doesn't mean they jumped on a bandwagon. But for me, I wanted to look closely at that, because I really do think that penal substitutionary atonement is getting right at the heart of the gospel. And I wanted to explore that a bit more and find ways in which I can articulate that and think through that doctrine. And then beyond that, start teasing out some of the relational implications of that doctrine, both between a person and God and a person in their own community. And so that's kind of the gist of where that doctoral work was.
All right. Wow. Holy cow. So yeah, you've done some good stuff there. That's great.
Yeah, it's a lot of work.
Yes, it is. Oh my goodness. How old are you?
I'm 43.
Okay. So you
So
just
I've had this forever. I've just been in school forever,
I was gonna say
basically.
you've just been a school nerd doing okay. Good for
Forever.
you, man.
Yeah.
That is
Yeah.
great.
That's it.
That's great. So how was London? Like what was that like going, in a completely different culture?
Yeah.
So aspects of biblical interpretation.
Yeah.
Is what you did is it
Yeah.
master's? Is that what you did
Yeah.
in?
Master of
Yeah.
Arts. Yeah. It was a really incredible time over there. I get into that. So I had gone to New Orleans Baptist Theological Seminary and did my Master's of Divinity. I did a specialization in Christian thought theology, and those classes were conducted over at Wycliffe Hall in Oxford. And while I was there, I was offered a position to do a PhD there at Wycliffe Hall. I was like, oh my gosh, that's awesome. Maybe I'll do that. As I started exploring thinking about going there, and I was like, oh, I should look at other schools in the UK too while I'm looking at this. Maybe there's something else that I should do, or what, I don't know. I was just thinking, this was forever ago now.
Right.
Came across London School of Theology and was really interested in the subject of hermeneutics and the art and science of interpretation. And they had a program committed to that field. And so I applied and went over and interviewed and all that. And in getting into school there, it was really incredible because it was so multicultural. Everybody in my program, somebody was from the Faroe Islands. I didn't know where the Faroe Islands were, but someone was from the Faroe Islands. Taiwan, a girl from Iceland, a guy from whatever, the Congo, whatever. So everybody in my class, there's probably just over a dozen of us, were from somewhere else in the world. And all of a sudden now here we are, I'm studying some philosophy with this girl from like Singapore. It's like,
Right.
and we come from two totally different worlds and two totally different frames of mind, And so that was an incredibly challenging time for all the right reasons, because I showed up having an undergrad and a graduate degree in theology and thinking I knew something. And then I just found every day I'd walk out of class with my head in my hands going, gosh, I've never heard of all of this. I've never even thought of that. Never even thought, And so it was a great, I was getting an education. It's like, what education's for? You're supposed to be
great.
So anyway, it was a really wonderful time. And they taught me not just what to think, but a whole lot of how to think. And I still have questions, a whole lot of questions as a result. But I'm okay with that too.
That's a good thing. Yeah, exactly. That's a good thing. That's, one of the things that, being very stout in my faith, when I went, going through school, I'm watching these kids go through there that were just, it was just messing with their mind more than anything. And I had one class, it was a philosophy class. Matter of fact, it's the very first class I had my master's. And so this was my very first venture into philosophy ever. Like, it just was not something that, I had ever thought about or had to even think about. I'd always been in business and I didn't need philosophy. I just needed dollars. I didn't really need any of that. And I had a great professor, guy by the name of Jason McKinney, or Jason Lee. Jason Lee McKinney is his name, doctor. And he wrote a book called Deconstructing a Disciple's Doubt. And it really helped me walk through, because it was kind of more of a, instead of an academic book, it was more of a, kind of a Cliff Notes version of the books, or, of philosophy. And it really just made a lot of sense to me. And, now, I'm sitting here with a lot of times, discipling people and, counseling them, and I'm walking them through a little bit of deconstruction of their own faith, just so they can kind of, and it was such a huge blessing for me just to be able to go through these things. So I can't imagine all the stuff that you've gone through, and all the questions that I have now, even going through my master's right now. I can't imagine what you've got going in that brain of yours, for sure.
But that's a place though that, like, I mean, truly, it's one of those things that ended up driving me not to transition only to talking about like the kids book, but it's something that I wanted to, like, after all of this theological education, and there's still a lifetime ahead of that I've still got to keep studying. I mean, I can't turn my computer right here, but I'm just buried in books all day today. I do want to, like, create a space or continue to call people to the fact that, like, the world of theological thought and deep spiritual formation and all that is not just for guys that get to go to, like, fancy schools in some other foreign country and blah. Like, theological thought is for everyone, starting with kids. And it's not just for the guys that get like a red phone on their desk to God or whatever. There's like no shortcut. And I want people to know that they belong. Like, I don't think that Jesus would want anybody, when it comes to theology, I don't think that Jesus would want people to feel embarrassed or ashamed or like they don't belong, like they're not good enough or smart enough to hang. It's like, if he wanted to blow people out of the water, he would not have talked in parables to fishermen. You know what I mean? Like, he was trying to connect with people. And so I keep that in mind.
That's
and that
great.
image of Jesus taking a child up in his arms and saying that, unless you become like this child, you'll never see the kingdom. Right. Like, that's a beautiful place to begin your theology, is to go, gosh,
That's
Jesus,
good.
a weak person, into his arms and says, "You belong right here with me."
Mm.
Well, that's great. Like if we begin our theological endeavors there, that sounds way better than just going like, well, let's see how complicated we can make things. So anyway, though it does very complicated.
Yeah, it does. And that's, I think, if you're looking at culture back then as well, I mean, you've got majority of the young boys going through rabbinical school for, most of their life until they finally deem them, well, they're not going to be a rabbi or they're just going to be a fisherman, and they kind of push them off in either direction. And we don't even, we're hoping our kids grab something from Sunday school when we drop them off 50% of the time. It's not even, we're not even that dedicated to drop them off to Sunday school. So I'm really interested in this book. I have a 22-year-old and a 21-year-old that we homeschooled and raised in the church and all of that. Now I have 12-year-old twins that we're doing the same thing, but we're not homeschooling because my wife got cancer and wasn't able to homeschool them a few years ago. So we just kind of kept them in the school system, but we're trying to do as much as we possibly can back at home, with the supplementary stuff as well. And I think, for years, and myself for years, I thought, the academic, theological, doctrinal types were not needed, in my opinion. And because all I was looking at was, you just need to share the gospel. You just need to share the good news of Jesus Christ. You just need to go out and say, well, saving them, a part of that is, discipling them and helping them go through sanctification and making sure that they are understanding the theology and the understanding of who God is. Because if you don't know who God is, it's kind of a moot point at that time. And so I really like what you're doing with this, with this book. So why don't you explain to our audience a little bit about this book and kind of how it came to play?
Yeah. So the book is called Thinking About God, a Theology Q&A for Kids. And it came out of conversations with my own kids during the pandemic. So you mentioned the pandemic a moment ago, and being here in Seattle, we went through a different version of the pandemic than what a lot of people did, I think, as far as different restrictions and shutdowns and regulations, all those kinds of things. And so during one particular season of the pandemic, my kids and my wife were sitting around the dinner table one night, and our son Jude just said, "Dad, what's a theologian?" And it was just kids will ask questions just out of nowhere, and you're like, all right, here we go. So I just told him, like, oh, well, it's a theologian is essentially somebody that thinks about God. Like that was the simplest way I could try to summarize all the things. Somebody that thinks about God. And he's like, oh, okay. So what's theology then? And so I started telling him, like, well, okay. And theology is we're the study of God. And we started getting into different doctrines. We started talking about the Trinity and creation and, Christology, and Jesus was resurrected from the dead. And, as we're going around the table, we're all nerding out a little bit together. And Jude just was like, this is really great. And I said, well, would it be helpful if I wrote some of these things down for you guys? And they're like, yeah, that would be awesome. Like a book. Like, yeah, I'll write you guys like a little theology book or something. And so I would get up early in the mornings and spend about an hour or so just thinking through, what do I want my kids to know? What are the big ideas? And how do I synthesize the worlds of both biblical theology and systematic theology for my kids? How do I bring those two worlds together? And so that ended up being what ended up becoming the book that just came out, is Thinking About God. And so when I say so for our listeners tonight, well, he just said two things: biblical theology and systematic theology. I've never even heard of those. What are those? Okay. Biblical theology, all it is basically telling the big story of the Bible, right?
Right.
So you start with God is the creator. He makes everything and everybody. And then creation rebels against God. Adam and Eve sin. That's called the fall. And then there's the next chapter, and the next scene is called redemption. That's where Jesus comes on the scene and dies on the cross and rises from the dead and so on. And then there's restoration. God's going to renew the earth one day and renew all of his people. All right, that's biblical theology. It's tracing like the big arc of the Bible. In systematic theology, it's more like you're taking an idea or a doctrine or something, and you're drilling down all throughout the Bible. So if you want to know about like the doctrine of the Holy Spirit, okay, he's there at creation, hovering over the water.
Right.
And say, we see him working in the lives of the prophets, and then we see him again at the baptism of Jesus, and then we see him again working through the life of Jesus. Then we see him at Pentecost, and so like, right. So again, you're just drilling down on one idea throughout Scripture. So that's systematic theology. And so I thought, like, well, gosh, if I get one go with my kids, how can I like try to summarize or synthesize both of these ideas together? Because they asked, I want to know theology. And I was like, well, all right, let me give you the best I can give you in your language. And so that was where that came from. I wrote the stuff. I wrote it for them. They started reading, like, this is really cool. And then I sent it over to Andrew Wolgamuth. He's the book agent that I've worked with on other things in the past. And he's like, oh, man, I think I know where to take this. And I said, okay, great. And he said, let's take this to B&H Kids. And we did. And they saw it and they were like, this is awesome, that we don't have anything like this. Like, this is a resource that a lot of people have not tried to swing at, like do theology for kids like this, And so they basically asked, would you be down to take your book and turn it into like a Q&A? Like, what if we take everything you wrote, but what if we frame it around questions and answers so that it can be like more interactive with kids and parents as they read together? I'm like, oh, I should have done that the first time. So that's exactly what we did. So we batted different around it. That's how the book came into being. Yeah.
Wow, that is great. So I'm sitting here thinking like, how many adults could benefit from reading this book?
Yeah, totally.
We have such a massive disconnect with Christians and theology and Christians in the Bible. We've got one of the most biblically illiterate generations that we've ever had. And what a great way just to get them into understanding even basic doctrine. And I'm assuming that's what the book is. I haven't yet. I'm actually getting ready to pick it up. Is it on Amazon yet?
Yeah, it's on Amazon. It's everywhere now. Okay. So yeah,
pick it up.
So that's the heart of it. And like, it really is something that I would hope that parents would, or grandparents or aunts or uncles or Sunday school teachers would feel the freedom to read alongside with the kids and to learn too. Like, I mean, there's some stuff in here like that, you're just not going to know. Like, they're just not words our pastors use, thank God. But they're not words that our pastors really use in the pulpit, because it can blow people out of the water with an idea. And again, like, good teachers don't want people walking away feeling dumb or ashamed or confused. You want people walking away going, I feel equipped and empowered in my faith, and I know God says in his word. At the same time, we do have some good, there are some big thoughts the kids ask, and there's complicated words that tend to give clear answers to those things. So my encouragement to parents would be, or anybody reading alongside, is you'll probably come across some words that you've never heard before. And as you do, go, oh, awesome. For example, kids will ask, and this is like in the book, like one of the things that kids ask is like, well, who made God? Everybody asks that at some point. And we parents know to say something like, well, nobody made God. He's just always existed. Like,
Right.
and that's kind of like, and I'm done. Like, I don't know. I don't have anything other than that to say. Right. Well, that's true. And that's called the doctrine of aseity. It's an old Latin word that means God, like negates the word se, which is self, which means the big idea is that God only proceeds from himself. Nobody made God. Okay, cool. Well, if God doesn't have parents and God wasn't made in a factory, God and God alone is the one that everything has to proceed from.
Right.
Okay, cool. Well, as you're reading that with a kid, you go, oh, that's cool. I didn't know that word, but that's amazing. There's a paragraph on that. And like, so the hope is to invite children and parents in at the same time and grow together and learn together. And then there's a ton of stuff in there that parents are gonna know. Like, oh, I know that story in the Bible, or I know what that word means, you know? And so it kind of, like you were saying a moment ago, like the biblical and theological illiteracy that our country's in right now, this is just one of those resources that I think could end up being really helpful and course correcting for a lot of people to become a little more literate, you know?
Right. I don't disagree. I mean, I'm just sitting here thinking for my church, do you have them in bulk? Do you sell them in bulk? Okay.
Yeah. Oh yeah. They sell them in, I think they're boxes of 48 or 50 or something like that. But yeah, they sell them in bulk from for sure. But then again, it's also like another, to show you like some of like the practical side of it. Like, there's a doctrine in the Bible called the doctrine of propitiation. You're like, all right, what is that? Well, that's back to what we were talking about a minute ago with like penal substitution.
Yeah, exactly.
And so it means to be a wrath averting sacrifice. Okay, great. Where does that come from in the Bible? Well, in the Passover, you have the people that are about to be set free, but the people are also sinful too. You know, they have to be covered too. They don't get to just walk out of captivity. So they need a covering. Well, that lamb dies as a substitute in the place of the people, and they go free. Later, when Jesus dies on the cross, he is called the Passover lamb. So when Jesus dies in our place for our sins, we go free. So we're forgiven. Great. And so then it concludes with questions at the end of the chapters like, okay, so that's what we talked about, being forgiven by Jesus. Awesome. Have you ever had to forgive somebody? What was that like? Did you have to forgive your brother or a sister or a friend? Did somebody have to forgive you? What was that like to have to ask for forgiveness? And so it's very simple in getting right down into very practical things that we can talk to our kids about, even though it starts in the clouds, so to speak, with some of these bigger ideas. We're trying to constantly bring it down and make it very practical and go, oh, this is how that theology is suddenly working out around my dinner table or on the schoolyard or whatever, when I find myself saying, I'm sorry I did that. Would you forgive me? You know?
Wow, that's great, man.
Yeah. So that's the art behind it. And then there's a guy that did the artwork. His name is Nate Faro, and he is in Nashville, Tennessee, and he did a fantastic job. Just like the artwork is just really like colorful and bright and beautiful, and like it's very, very much so playful. Like throughout the book, there's these like big bubbles that, like, you know, and it's aesthetically like engaging. It's not a dull, like all of my other theology that are so boring. I mean, literally every theology book I've owned is just like, look how boring all of them are. So like, it's nice to have a aesthetically pleasing one. So
awesome. Yeah. Well, that is great. So did it go out on shelves this month?
Yes. I think it's we're in October now.
Yeah, you can get like the hardback on Amazon for like less than $12, 11 something.
Okay.
So
yeah, it's great. Yeah, I think it's less than a month old.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
Man, I'm so glad God put us in our, because I mean, to be honest, I'm sitting here. I want to have him on another podcast. I just want to talk theology. I don't want to talk like books or
yeah, we
anything.
can do that anytime. Do that.
That is awesome, man. So you had, this moment, and what have your kids thought about it after you kind of went through that with them, and
Yeah.
and now they're looking at it going, oh, we've already done that,
Yeah.
you
Yeah,
know.
kind of when the book showed up, from the publisher just before they released, we opened it up and they're like, "Oh my gosh, that's you really wrote us a theology book." um, but they've really enjoyed it. It's something that like we are actually reading right now, just as a family, just going, okay, here you go. Like it's been engaging, and they've given like the thumbs up, which if my kids will tell me it doesn't suck, then okay.
It's
Like
good. Yeah, exactly.
your kids will tell you the truth, like, Dad, that was lame or whatever. So
All right.
they gave it a gold star. So if it passes their test, then I'm okay with that.
Well, we're definitely going to get it because we do New City Catechisms. I don't know if you've ever seen that.
Oh yeah, they're awesome.
Yeah, we do that sitting around the table, the dinner table. We do that, and we did that with our older kids as well. But this will be good because that's not something that we talk. I've got a certain group of guys, and you probably do too. That we'll sit and mull over theology and some deeper questions and some stuff that you wouldn't necessarily just puke out on the church. Whether it's predestination or end of times or just anything that just kind of gets people riled up. And I can't say honestly that I've ever thought about like really pouring out into our kids, which that's the greatest place to start, about some of the doctrinal issues that should be norm in a church, but unfortunately hasn't been for the last, gosh, I would say probably 30, 40, 50 years, maybe, especially in the Western church.
Yeah.
I love your heart that you're focusing on and getting this out to the kids like that.
Yeah. Well, the thing is like, you don't want your kids walking into middle school, high school, and then finally their first philosophy class in college, and they get blown out of the water because somebody says, God is a myth. The historical Jesus never existed. The Holy Spirit is nothing more than emotionalism or something like that. The Bible is a collection of what, and just be blown out of the water. I want our kids to be able to walk into middle school, high school, and college having heard of some things going, no, actually my faith is credible. I'm not just trusting in Jesus the way I used to believe in Santa Claus or whatever. Right. Like I'm not a Christian because I think I should just be a good person. No, I'm a Christian because I believe that Jesus was historically resurrected from the grave, and that has implications on my life here and now and in the life to come. And here's why I'm building my life this way. And so we just don't want our kids to be blown out of the water of their faith because we didn't take the time to actually help them think critically through a few things. And the reality is, as parents, we can do that. Like, you don't need a PhD in whatever to do that, And again, like, this was an effort to really give parents like, okay, dude, I'm in. Like, I know I trust Jesus. I believe the Bible. I want my kids to know Jesus and trust the Bible. And but I don't know where to start, Like, right. I run a landscaping company or I work in cybersecurity. I have no idea where to start, dude. Like, this would be the spot to, like, here you go. This is for that person, like, okay, grab that, read that one with your kid. You'll be set up really well.
That's good.
The two things I think I noticed that we don't teach children soon enough is about who God is before Jesus. I saw an interview with Alistair Begg one time, and he said, when he was a teenager, he was working with one of his friends. It was a girl at a coffee shop or something. And he kept talking about Jesus's return, Jesus's return, Jesus's return. And she finally looked at him and she said, Alistair, stop. She said, I'm still trying to figure out, still trying to process his first coming.
Yeah.
I'm not ready to process his second coming. And so I think that's number one. I think we don't teach kids about God the Father and what you were talking about early, the origin of him and what he did soon enough. And two, I don't think we talk to kids enough about I think we talk to kids about sins. I don't think we talk to kids about sin.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we talk to kids, and I can tell by the way I see people preach the gospel, because they point out people's sins, and that can instantly get somebody to look at your life and say, well, you do this, this, this wrong.
Right.
But if we talk about sin and we talk about the root cause of this whole issue, then we start at the same place. You started as the same place at me, right, Alex? Jody started at the same place as me. We were born dead in our sin, right? And so too often, I think we preach the gospel trying to get people to see their sins, and it can be putting them on defensive instead of seeing their sin, right? And if you teach kids about sin early, then they'll know how to talk about it and evangelize the same way. Yep. Which again puts them all in at the same starting point, as opposed to, well, you've got this, 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 and this in your life, and I've got this, this, this. Right. I just think those are two things we should be teaching our children at a young age.
That's good. That's really good. So I've got a suggestion for you. So maybe you can pray about this, Alex. What you need to do now is follow with a follow-up book on the worldview, along with the biblical view.
Yeah, man. You know what? Somebody else said that to me not long ago.
No kidding?
Yeah, probably 3 weeks ago, someone said, you know what? You need a kid's apologetics book to follow the theology book, and get into that kind of stuff, which would be fun.
Yeah, because Alex, on here, we get into conversations a lot about, especially when we don't have a guest and it's just us, about current events and stuff like that. And the one thing that we have found, and it was really finding it by having these conversations, is a few weeks back, we decided that we wanted to end all those conversations with, okay, now that we've identified the problem and we we're telling people that, we saw this or this is going on, what is the Christian's response in the moment of everything that's going on? How does the Bible say a Christian is supposed to respond? Right? A Christian is not supposed to rise up against their government. A Christian is not supposed to do all these things that, in the last 100 years, if the church had been doing what you led off this podcast by saying, feeding people, clothing people, visiting people, the world would be a different place, but we're too busy fighting causes. And I like your thought process of getting your church or the people that you're trying to inspire back to the foundation.
Yeah, there you go.
So, yeah, I mean, I just wanted to say that it's just we've got all of our priorities are wrong, and we've got to get back to what the church was founded to do, which is to preach the gospel and help the widows and the orphans.
There you go. That's it.
Yeah, exactly. Amen. So what's on the horizon for Pastor Alex? What you got coming up, or are you now you're in church season? So you got October to Easter, you got church season. So
yeah, no kidding. It's on. So right now at our church, we're walking through the 7 I am sayings of Jesus in the Gospel of John. I'm talking about the exclusivity of Christ and what that means for our world right now. And so really trying to exegete the culture right now and really speak to deconstruction and so much of the other dysphorias that we're living in, and bring some clarity there from scripture. So that's one. Then we'll go into Advent, and then I think we're going to go through the book of Ecclesiastes at the turn of the year. And so
I just did that. I just did that about 2.5 years ago. I just finished Acts. It took me 2 years to go through Acts.
yeah.
So and then we just started second, third John. That's going to take me about a year to do all of those by the time I get it all done. But Ecclesiastes for me was just an eye opener. Like, just, man, it was so good.
Yeah, I can't wait to do it. Yeah, so we're doing that. I just finished writing a cookbook with my wife, and so I've been into cooking for a long time, and so we just finished a cookbook last Friday, and so we'll start releasing stuff about that soon.
Dude, you're all over it, man. That's awesome.
Isn't that wild? So yeah, it's been fun. So that's what's on the horizon. And then I don't know, when I get done here, I'm gonna go figure out what we're having for dinner tonight.
Well, I was watching some of your videos and some your recipes and stuff, man. It got me hungry today. Holy cow.
Yeah.
That's great. Well, brother, tell us your social media, like where can people find you? And where can they get the book?
Yeah. You can connect with me through my website. So paearly.com. So yeah, it's just PA Early. My name's Patrick Alexander Early. So paearly.com.
I was throwing pastor in there. Okay, so it's
Our pastor. There's that. And then, I'm on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. It's just Alex Early. So
awesome.
I'm easy to find. Yeah.
And so the book Thinking About God.
Yep. There's a landing page for the book as well. If you go to thinkingaboutgodbook.com, that'll take you everywhere where you can buy the book. And there's even a 5-day devotional set up over at YouVersion as well, to kind of go along with the book if you want to go there as well. So YouVersion has a 5-day thing on thinking about God, and Lifeway's posted about it a few times. There's some blogs over there, and so there's a few other things to find.
Well, congratulations, man. We'll be praying this thing blows up and you reach more and more of the younger generation. I think that's you're onto something, because I think that's what, if we want to change anything, we need to start with the younger generation. And next 25, 30 years, man, the world could look a lot different.
Yep.
Amen. Well, brother, thank you again so much for your time. Yeah. And folks, we want to encourage you, make sure that if you have kids, young kids, even teenagers, make sure that you go out and get this book. It is on Amazon and just about anywhere else you can get a book, as well as thinkingaboutgod.com. So make sure you check that website out. And then paearly.com, you can check out Mr. Alex and Pastor Alex and Dr. Alex. He's got all these titles there, and a dad and a husband. So you guys be praying for him, be praying for the Redemption Church as well in Seattle. They need all the help they can get. And God bless you guys, and we will see y'all next week. Pastor Alex, thanks again, buddy.
All right, Alex.
Thank you.
All right, brother. God bless and have a great night, man.
Thanks, guys.
Man, that was good. Thank you so much.
That was a pleasure.
Yes, seriously, when everything calms down, maybe, the beginning of the year, I'd love to just have you back on here and, just seriously have some good theological, some good discussions.
I'm happy to.
Okay. That's one thing that we haven't done. We do it together, but we haven't had anybody on here that we're just going to sit and chew through some stuff through. We'd love to do that.
Why does nobody preach Romans?
Have you read it? Yeah, it's awesome. I'd like to go through Romans.
Nobody preach Romans.
Yeah, man.
After spending 2 years in Acts, I almost went straight into Romans.
You've been listening to the Man Up God's Way podcast. Visit us on Facebook, Spotify, Apple, iTunes, and our website at manupgodsway.org.
Right.
Romans is the gospel to the Gentile. Romans is what God wanted me to know.
Yeah.
I've never understood it, but anyway.
That's good. All right, brother. Well, have a great night. Thank you so much for allowing us to take some of your time.
Thank you for having me.
All right. God bless.